They were America's first family of the frontier, bold, upright, unshakably loyal. The Cartwrights rode across living rooms in full color, long before color television became the norm. Fathers admired their grit, mothers trusted their virtue, and children dreamed of growing up on a ranch like the Ponderosa. Bonanza wasn't just entertainment. It was a mirror held up to the soul of mid-century America. But mirrors, as we know, have a habit of cracking. Behind the wholesome smiles and rugged masculinity was a cast plagued by loss, rebellion, illness, and silence. Dan Blocker, the gentle giant who embodied kindness, died before he could see his children grow up. Michael Landon, the dreamer who reinvented the American father for a new generation, fought cancer with fire in his voice and lost. Lorne Greene, the moral compass of the show, faded quietly after heart surgery. And Pernell Roberts, the most principled of them all, spent his life challenging the very system that made him famous. The tragedies didn't stop with the main cast. They reached into the lives of those who circled their orbit, supporting roles, guest stars, and background figures who were forgotten long before they passed. This wasn't supposed to be their story. They were symbols of hope, stability, and the great American promise. But fame rarely protects its heroes. Instead, it casts long shadows over their private pain. Bonanza gave these actors a place in history, but history has a cruel way of rewriting legacies when the spotlight fades. What happened to the men and women who built one of television's most enduring legends? What cost did they pay for carrying the weight of millions of viewers' expectations? And how many of them left this world carrying regrets that no script could ever resolve? If you've ever loved this show, or wondered what happened to those faces you grew up with, stay with us. Their real stories are far more powerful than fiction. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to uncover more untold truths behind Hollywood's golden age. What lies behind the screen might just change how you remember it forever. Dan Blocker, Hoss Cartwright. Dan Blocker was never meant to be a star, not in the Hollywood sense. He was too big, too humble, too real. Born Bobby Don Blocker in a small Texas town in 1928, he weighed a staggering 14 pounds at birth, a sign of the physical presence that would follow him all his life. Before he ever stepped onto a soundstage, he was a soldier, a teacher, a father, and a man with a deep Southern soul. But when he slipped on the 10-gallon hat of Eric Hoss Cartwright in Bonanza, something extraordinary happened. Audiences didn't just watch Hoss, they loved him. In a world of hardened cowboys, Hoss was the beating heart. Gentle, sincere, awkward at times, but always kind. Blocker brought to the role a rare emotional authenticity that could never be scripted. It came from who he was, not who he played. Off-screen, he was just as loved. Known around set for his booming laugh and big-hearted nature, Blocker was a man who remembered crew members' birthdays and brought lunch for extras. But as the seasons rolled on and his fame grew, so did the toll. The production schedule was grueling. 30 or more episodes a year, 5-day shoots that ran dawn to dusk. His weight, once a lovable trait of the character, became a health concern. He spoke openly about the pressure of staying in shape and once joked that he could lose 5 pounds just walking to the store. But behind the humor was strain. In 1972, everything unraveled. At just 43 years old, Dan Blocker entered the hospital for routine gallbladder surgery. What was supposed to be a standard procedure ended in tragedy. A pulmonary embolism took his life, and with it, the spirit of Bonanza. The show, still in the top 20, couldn't survive the loss. Fans mourned, the cast was shattered, and television lost one of its most beloved souls. There was no final episode for Hoss. No goodbye. He simply vanished, leaving a silence that echoed louder than any gunshot on the Ponderosa. Michael Landon, Little Joe Cartwright. Michael Landon was the kind of star who seemed invincible. With his thick brown curls, smoldering eyes, and boyish charm, he embodied the image of the all-American rebel. Born Eugene Maurice Orowitz in 1936 in Queens, New York, he endured a turbulent childhood with a suicidal mother and a fractured sense of identity. But pain has a way of shaping greatness. By the time he became Little Joe Cartwright on Bonanza, Landon wasn't just acting. He was rewriting his life in real time, turning trauma into tenderness, defiance into charisma. As the youngest of the Cartwright brothers, little Joe was fiery, impulsive, magnetic. Landon's portrayal struck a chord with young viewers who saw in him both vulnerability and strength. Off-screen, instead of simply performing, Landon soon sought a deeper creative role behind the scenes. By the late 1960s, he began writing and directing episodes of Bonanza, driven not by vanity, but by a genuine passion for storytelling and a desire to shape the emotional heart of the show. He had stories to tell, and he wasn't going to wait for someone else to give him permission. When Dan Blocker died in 1972, Landon was devastated. He funneled that grief into one of the most poignant episodes ever aired, Forever. It wasn't just fiction. It was a farewell letter to a fallen brother. After Bonanza ended, Landon didn't fade, he transformed. As Charles Ingalls in Little House on the Prairie, he became the face of fatherhood for a generation. Then as Jonathan Smith in Highway to Heaven, he became an angel, both literally and symbolically. But angels aren't immune to mortality. In April 1991, Landon revealed he had been diagnosed with advanced pancreatic cancer. The news sent shockwaves across America. Fans clung to hope as he faced the illness with the same grit he brought to every role. He spoke openly about his regrets, about drinking too much, smoking too much, and ignoring the warning signs. 3 months later, on July 1st, 1991, he died at just 54 years old. Michael Landon, who had once seemed larger than life, was gone. But his legacy lived on, not in monuments or awards, but in the hearts of those who saw in him the father, the brother, the friend they always wished they had. Lorne Greene, Ben Cartwright. Lorne Greene didn't just play a father on television. He became one to millions. With his deep, commanding voice and solemn gaze, he gave Ben Cartwright a gravity that grounded the entire world of Bonanza. Born Lionheim Greene in 1915 in Ottawa, Canada, Greene's path began not in film, but in radio. His voice, rich, resonant, and unforgettable, made him a national icon long before he stepped in front of a camera. He was known as the Voice of Canada, and during World War II, the Voice of Doom, for his chilling wartime news broadcasts. But it was Hollywood that transformed him into a face people trusted. When he was cast as Ben Cartwright in 1959, he brought not just presence, but dignity. A widowed father of 3 very different sons, each by a different mother, Ben was firm but fair, a moral anchor in a world often defined by guns and greed. Greene embodied those values off camera too. He wasn't the kind of star who courted controversy. While others fought with producers or chased tabloid headlines, Greene stayed steady. He once said the real challenge wasn't fame. It was honoring the weight of being a role model to so many. Outside of Bonanza, he explored music and hosted television specials. Later in life, he returned to the genre that made him famous, taking on the role of Commander Adama in Battlestar Galactica, again the leader, again the patriarch, but now in space. Even as trends changed, Greene remained a symbol of stability. In 1969, he was made an Officer of the Order of Canada, a rare honor for a performer, recognizing not only his contributions to the arts, but to public life. In 1987, after complications from heart surgery, he developed pneumonia and passed away in Santa Monica at the age of 72. His death didn't make front pages the way others might have, but the silence left behind was deafening. Without Lorne Greene, television lost more than just an actor. It lost the father figure of an entire era, someone who made audiences feel like no matter how rough the world became, there would always be one man who stood tall, steady, and unshaken in the storm. Pernell Roberts, Adam Cartwright. Pernell Roberts was the outlier, the one who never quite fit the mold and never wanted to. As Adam Cartwright, the eldest son on Bonanza, he was the brooding intellectual, the calm counterweight to his brother's impulsiveness. But off-screen, Roberts was far more complex. Born Pernell Elvin Roberts Jr. in 1928 in Georgia, he had no interest in playing by Hollywood's rules. He served in the Marine Corps, flunked out of college twice, worked as a butcher and a railroad riveter, and found his calling on the stage, where Shakespeare, not shootouts, shaped his craft. When Bonanza launched in 1959, he was already an award-winning theater actor with a drama desk under his belt. He brought that gravitas to Adam, thoughtful, restrained, deeply human. But fame came with a price Roberts wasn't willing to pay. As the show became a ratings juggernaut, he grew restless, disillusioned with the scripts and frustrated by the lack of depth in his character. While the world embraced Bonanza as wholesome American storytelling, Roberts saw something different, a missed opportunity for honesty and progress. He pushed back, challenging writers to avoid cliches, to treat Hop Sing as a full character instead of comic relief, to make women more than just love interests of the week. In an era when speaking up could end a career, he didn't care. He left Bonanza in 1965, walking away from money, stability, and one of the most watched shows on television. The industry didn't forgive easily. He spent years in minor film roles, appearing in forgettable foreign productions and TV guest spots. But in 1979, Roberts staged an unlikely comeback as Trapper John, MD, playing a matured version of the character originated in MASH star. The show ran 7 seasons, and for a moment, the spotlight found him again. But by then, the rebel had softened. He was older, grayer, balding, but no less principled. A lifelong civil rights activist, he marched in Selma, fought for casting diversity, and rejected any role that compromised his values. In 2010, after a quiet battle with pancreatic cancer, Pernell Roberts passed away at the age of 81. He had outlived every other Cartwright, but remained, to the end, the one who never truly belonged to the Ponderosa. Victor Sunyong, Hop Sing. Victor Sunyong wasn't supposed to be remembered. In the rigid world of 1950s and 60s television, Asian American actors were rarely allowed to be more than stereotypes, exaggerated accents, background comic relief, and always servile. But Victor made you remember him. As Hop Sing, the fiery and loyal cook of the Cartwright Ranch, he stood out in every scene. Not because the role gave him much to say, but because he infused it with dignity, spark, and a fierce humanity the script never wrote for him. Behind the apron and the broken English was a veteran of over 2 decades in Hollywood, an actor who had played Jimmy Chan, the number 2 son, in more than a dozen Charlie Chan films long before Bonanza came calling. Born Victor Chung Young in 1915 in San Francisco, his childhood was marked by hardship. His mother died in the influenza epidemic of 1919, and his father, overwhelmed, placed Victor and his sister in a children's shelter. Years later, reunited with family, he worked his way through college as a houseboy, eventually earning a degree in economics from UC Berkeley. Acting wasn't part of the plan. He stumbled into it while selling flame-retardant chemicals to film studios, and someone noticed his presence. Hollywood gave him a chance, but not a fair one. He served in the U.S. Air Force during World War II, rose to the rank of captain in military intelligence, and then returned to an industry that still wanted him to play laundrymen and waiters. Hop Sing became his most enduring role, but it was also a prison. Victor wanted more. He was an accomplished Cantonese chef, wrote the Great Wok Cookbook in 1974, and spent his later years giving cooking demonstrations to make ends meet. In 1980, he was working on a second cookbook when he was found dead in his modest bungalow in North Hollywood. The cause? Accidental asphyxiation from a faulty gas stove. He was 65 years old. There were no headlines, no tributes, no retrospectives. But the truth remains, Victor Sen Yung didn't just serve meals on screen. He served resilience, humor, and heart in a world that too often saw him as invisible. Ray Teal, Sheriff Roy Coffey. Ray Teal was never the star of the show, and he never needed to be. His power came from stillness, the kind of quiet authority that didn't shout for attention, but earned it by simply standing firm. As Sheriff Roy Coffey in Bonanza, he was the law of Virginia City, but more than that, he was a moral equal to the Cartwrights, steady, fair, and unshakably decent. In a town filled with fast tempers and faster guns, Sheriff Coffey was the man who believed that reason came before bullets. And somehow, Ray Teal made that believable every single time he stepped on screen. Born in 1902 in Nebraska, Teal's career stretched far beyond Bonanza. He was one of Hollywood's most prolific character actors, with over 300 film and television credits to his name. From noir thrillers to classic westerns, he was the face you recognized even if you didn't know his name. He played cops, judges, barkeeps, and military men, always a figure of authority, always anchoring the chaos around him. But Bonanza gave him something different: consistency. Over more than 90 episodes, he became part of the Ponderosa's extended family, not just a symbol of justice, but a trusted presence that viewers came to depend on. Off-screen, there were no scandals, no tabloid stories, no reinventions. Teal was a man who let his work speak for itself. He didn't chase the spotlight, and it never chased him back, but it followed him quietly, loyally, the way an old audience does with someone who feels like home. In 1976, Teal passed away from natural causes at the age of 74. His death didn't make headlines, but for fans of Bonanza, it marked the end of something rare. He had never asked for recognition, but in the world of the Ponderosa, he had become something indispensable, a quiet symbol of what decency looked like when no one was watching. Guy Williams, Cartwright. Guy Williams was meant to replace a Cartwright, but instead, he became something far more elusive, a shadow of what might have been. When Pernell Roberts threatened to leave Bonanza, producers turned to Williams, a rising star best known for his swashbuckling charm as Zorro. Tall, handsome, and magnetic, he was brought in as Will Cartwright, a cousin to the Cartwright boys, poised to become the new third son. On paper, it was a seamless solution. In practice, it became a ghost chapter in Bonanza's long legacy. Born Armando Joseph Catalano in 1924 in New York City to Sicilian immigrants, Williams had movie star looks and a voice that dripped charisma. He'd already carved a place in television history as the masked hero of Disney's Zorro, and his brief turn in Bonanza felt like the natural next step. But timing has its own script. Pernell Roberts ultimately chose to stay one more year, and just like that, Will Cartwright vanished. No exit, no farewell, no resolution. Williams' 4-episode arc became a television curiosity, an elegant footnote that left fans wondering what could have been. While his time on Bonanza was short, Williams' impact on the era was undeniable. After the show, he returned to television as Professor John Robinson in Lost in Space, once again playing the dignified family man, this time floating among stars rather than riding across deserts. Off camera, he sought a quieter life. Disenchanted with Hollywood's relentless pace and empty glamour, he eventually relocated to Argentina, where Zorro was not just beloved, but iconic. There, he found adoration and peace, living with the kind of quiet reverence rarely afforded to American actors of his era. In 1989, Guy Williams died in Buenos Aires from a cerebral aneurysm. He was 65. His death was discovered days after it happened, alone, in the apartment of a man once adored by millions. But even in death, he remained the perfect mystery. The actor who could have worn a Cartwright badge, but instead wore a mask, carried a sword, and left behind a legacy carved in quiet elegance and unanswered questions. Kathy Brown, Laura Dayton. Kathy Brown wasn't meant to stay long in Bonanza, but for a moment, she was destined to become a Cartwright. With her soft blonde curls, piercing eyes, and a presence that blended strength with grace, she entered the Ponderosa not as a guest star, but as a possible future wife. Cast as Laura Dayton during the show's 5th season, Brown played a widow who caught the heart of Adam Cartwright. The plan, behind the scenes, was clear. If Pernell Roberts left the show, as he often threatened, Laura would marry Adam and exit with him. It was a poetic solution, a send-off wrapped in romance. But television rarely plays out like a fairy tale. Roberts stayed one more season. Laura didn't. Born Jacqueline Sue Brown in Missouri in 1930, she found her way to the screen through the stage, discovered after a standout performance in Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. She was a fixture of 1960s and 70s television. Gunsmoke, Perry Mason, Star Trek. A fresh-faced ingenue who knew how to command a scene without stealing it. But even with her talent, she was often boxed in by the roles available to women at the time. The love interest, the innocent, the temporary. And she knew it. She once voiced her frustration at always being cast in sweet, passive roles, eager for meatier, Messier characters that never quite arrived. After Bonanza, Brown married Darren McGavin, the star of Kolchak, The Night Stalker, and together they launched a production company. It was a creative partnership that allowed her to step behind the camera, even as her on-screen appearances dwindled. By 1980, she had quietly stepped away from Hollywood. She survived breast cancer, outlived the golden age of television, and chose privacy over publicity. Kathy Brown died in 2003 of natural causes at the age of 72. No scandal, no headlines, just silence. She was once on the verge of becoming a Cartwright, of riding off into the sunset with the eldest son of the Ponderosa. Instead, she became something rarer, a woman who left quietly, lived fully, and never needed a dramatic exit to be remembered. Barry Coe, Clay Stafford. Barry Coe appeared in Bonanza for just a single episode, but in that short span, he was introduced as something monumental, Little Joe's half-brother. Clay Stafford, the charming and mysterious stranger, arrived with a backstory that could have reshaped the entire Cartwright family dynamic. There was tension, there was curiosity, and for a brief moment, there was the possibility of Clay becoming a regular fixture at the Ponderosa. But just as quickly as he arrived, he was gone. Never seen again, never mentioned again. For viewers, he became one of Bonanza's great what-ifs. For Barry Coe, it was just one chapter in a life that never quite found its spotlight. Born Barry Clark Heacock in 1934 in Los Angeles, he was discovered like many young actors of his era, handsome, poised, and plucked from obscurity by a talent scout during a fraternity trip to Palm Springs. Signed by 20th Century Fox, he was pushed as a rising star through the late 1950s and early 1960s, landing supporting roles in films like Peyton Place and The 300 Spartans. He had the look, the voice, and the presence, but somehow never found the breakout role that would cement him in the public imagination. His appearance in Bonanza in 1960 as Clay Stafford was supposed to be different. The character had potential, and Coe delivered. But as the show's creative direction shifted and core cast members stayed, Clay was quietly written out. After that, Coe continued acting, small roles in TV, the occasional film, but the spotlight kept moving past him. In the late 1970s and early 80s, he found a strange kind of fame as the face of Mr. Goodwrench in a long-running national ad campaign for auto repair services. For many Americans, he was suddenly familiar again, but not as Clay Stafford, not as a Cartwright. He died in 2019 at the age of 84 from complications related to myelodysplastic syndrome. There were no retrospectives, no network tributes. But those who remember him as Clay Stafford remember a moment when the Ponderosa might have opened its doors to a new son, one who never got the chance to stay, but whose brief presence still lingers like a ghost in the wind. Bonanza wasn't just a television series. It was a national ritual, a cultural landmark, and for many, a second family watch from the glow of a living room screen. Week after week, it promised justice, loyalty, and love in a world that too often felt unpredictable. But the real lives of those who built that world, who rode across the plains of the Ponderosa and etched themselves into America's collective memory, tell a story far more fragile. Some left too soon, like Dan Blocker, whose death shattered the show's rhythm. Others, like Michael Landon, burned brightly through multiple generations, only to be undone by a disease that didn't care about charisma or legacy. Lorne Greene stood like a rock until age and illness wore him down. And Pernell Roberts, the restless soul, outlived them all but never quite returned to where it started. Even the quieter figures, Victor Sen Yung in his kitchen, Ray Teal on horseback, Guy Williams waiting in the wings, Kathy Brown with a heart full of unfulfilled arcs, Barry Coe with a script that ended before it ever truly began. They were all pieces of a world that felt timeless but was, in truth, heartbreakingly temporary. Fame gave them immortality on screen. Reality gave them vulnerability behind it. There's something profoundly haunting about revisiting Bonanza today, knowing how it all ended, not just for the show, but for those who gave it life. The episodes remain, pristine and eternal. But the people? They faded, sometimes quietly, sometimes tragically. And yet, in those old frames, in every slow pan across the Nevada hills, and every knowing smile over a campfire, you can still feel them, still hear them, still believe in what they try to give us, if only for an hour each week. If these stories moved you, if the faces of the Cartwrights and those around them still echo in your memory, subscribe to the channel. Because behind every great show is a deeper truth, a human cost, and a legacy worth remembering. And we'll be here to uncover every one of them.